Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. Today we'll be discussing a variety of topics, a variety of different subjects. Uh, where we encompass music, sports, and entertainment, we will be discussing all three components today, um, which is kind of rare. Most of the time, it's just geared towards mostly music or more sports. But today we have a little bit of everything. So stay tuned for throughout the episode for the multiple topics that we will discuss, and I will also chop up each of the different subjects individually. But also, as usual, throughout the video, you will have the option to skim to the next section, as it will be separated into 4 different parts throughout the segment. So you have that option as well. So I'll get into the topics that we have today. So the first one is one of my favorite websites I go to for hip hop news is Hip Hop DX. They had a discussion about the 10 era mixtapes that deserve to be on streaming platforms. Now there's starting to be a trend recently with mixtapes from the previous eras starting to make their way to streaming platforms, also known as DSPs. Most recently, J. Cole dropped a couple of his mixtapes, the warm up and such. The warm up and I forgot the other mixtapes, but he dropped 3 mixtapes that coincide with his podcast that he has put out now. And those different mixtapes are making their way to streaming platforms, so you don't have to go to other sites to get them or go to other avenues to get them. You can stay on the same place, listen to their music on one platform, which is a beautiful thing for the viewer and for the listener. Rather than the viewer, but the listener, people who made their mark listening to mixtapes like myself. So growing up in the early 2000s, late 90s, mixtapes were a huge thing. Just to give a little background on mixtapes and what they are, mixtapes they don't count towards the RIAA certifications or anything like that. They don't count towards record sales or any obligations that the artist has to the label per se. Mixtapes are just basically today EPs are considered what they used to be mixtapes back in the day, I should say. So a mixtape is not an album, it's not a collective piece of work. It's intended to do 4 things that I've kind of gathered. So the first thing that it was to do is the prelude to an album. So people like Lil Wayne back in the day, even Drake and Kendrick and people, things like that, they would drop these mixtapes before the album. Because for one reason, it would give the fans something to listen to while they wait for the album to come out, to kind of create that hype, to create the energy for the album that's coming out. And then 2, the reason for the prelude to the album was simply just to put out more additional music that they didn't want to put on the album, or that the label didn't see fit as album worthy or album credible. So that was the 2 reasons that they had the prelude to the mixtape. The mixtape was a prelude to an album. And then the mixtapes also served a purpose for experimentation. So if you want to experiment with a new sound or a new artist or some new genre that you want to go into, you would put out a mixtape and the fans would get a feel for it. And then I don't know if they would read the comments or if they would just go off the numbers and see how many times a song was played and stuff like that. And those songs still can go on the radio, and some of them did. So it kind of gave them a healthy way to experiment without losing credibility on sales or leverage on their contracts and things like that. So mixtapes had that serving too. And then the third, the third message, the third reason why mixtapes were so prevalent back in the day is because the artists got to show their range. They got to show or display their range. So if they could rap about different subject matter, they could rap about different schemes, they could rap about different different things. If they want to sing, if they wanted to do things like that, they could show that range on the mixtape. So the viewer, I mean the listener would be like, wow, maybe they might put that on the next album, maybe not. Also, they worked with different people that they never worked with before on these mixtapes, just to see what the sound sounded like and what the fans would think of it. And then the last purpose of the mixtape was just um, they would send messages in the mixtapes. I know a lot of Lil Wayne mixtapes, he would have these skits where he was talking about different things that he felt about life and about different people and the different ways he got successful and things like of that nature. Now they have podcasts and you have different media sources and all these different shows to kind of talk about it. But back then, mixtapes served as a purpose of your own messaging system broadcasting. And it didn't count against your sales and leverage towards the label. So mixtapes had a very important purpose, but to get into the 10 era mixtapes that they wanted to that deserved to go on streaming platforms, it was a good discussion, and some of those mixtapes I've heard before and some I have not. But to just, I kind of did a twist on those mixtapes and did a couple of mixtapes or several mixtapes that kind of influenced my life growing up, and that I, not that I want to see on streaming platform because some of these mixtapes are, but just mixtapes in general that kind of served a purpose for me and had personal merit or personal meaning in my life. So the first mixtape that kind of changed the game for me as a listener was the Frank Ocean Nostalgia Ultra. Now, this mixtape was the first time that I ever heard Frank Ocean's music. Um, like I said, this album, this mixtape changed my life because I had never heard anything like it. It was essentially if Nas knew how to sing and he was still had the same subject matter. So it was rare to hear thought provoking R&B music, and most of the time when I hear R&B music, it's just passionate music about love, loss, love gained, love found. It was gearing towards love, but he sung about other things that were prominent to society and that were important to society and things that made you think about life and the way that you view things. The way Frank Ocean attacked the song was it was hip hop in motion with the R&B twist. So I had never seen that before. I mean, you've seen Lauryn Hill's before, but it was mostly, like I said, it was about love, lost, love found. And she did have components of her music that discussed poverty and child support and things like that. But as far as Frank Ocean, he questioned marriage, he questioned love, what is it really about? He questioned just society in general, way they view people. Just because you have a job doesn't mean you're seen as that person. It was very thought provoking. It was changing, and then, like I said, his voice was one of the best I ever heard. Like I said, he doesn't drop music frequently, but back then when he was younger, coming up, every time he dropped a mixtape or a song, I had to listen to it, and it was rare for an R&B singer for me to just go out and listen to every song that they had. Now you have a Lil Wayne, you have like a Drake back in the day, or Kendrick, somebody who drops music that you look forward to, but R&B, I just wasn't checking for R&B like that back then. But he does have a hip hop twist coming from Odd Future, so he had the unique perspective that most other R&B artists didn't have. So that was one of the first ones I thought about. And then the second one, I was thinking about mixtapes that I thought had changed my life, and it was hard to pick one, so I picked all of them. So Lil Wayne, all his mixtapes that he put out, whether it be the Gangsta Grills, the Drought albums, um, he put out, the No Ceiling mixtapes. All of those mixtapes had songs that you can listen to on the radio, that you can listen to in your car, you can listen around family members, whatever. He had so many different songs and so many different mixtapes. Anytime he officially dropped the mixtape, it was must see. I mean, must listen. And I remember in school, one of my teachers, who I didn't even think listened to rap or anything that had to do with rap, she asked everybody in the class. She said, "How many songs?" I want everybody to look at their iPods because iPods was big back then to show you how old this was. She said, "Look in your iPods and tell me how many different Lil Wayne songs you have on your iPod." And everybody had hundreds, hundreds. No matter who it was, they had hundreds. Whether it be pure Lil Wayne songs or songs that were featuring Lil Wayne. So that just showed you the kind of run he was on, the type of impact he had on society, not just hip hop, but just people in general. He was doing songs with country artists, pop artists, R&B artists, uh, you name it, electronic artists. He was just so popular at the time. If you had a Lil Wayne song, you were going to do numbers, and people look forward to hearing Lil Wayne's music at the time. So with the punchlines he had and just the content he was putting out, everything was quality, but he was putting out quantity too, which was rarely seen. To put out put out that much quantity at that quality at that clip was just, like I said, it was unheard of, and it's still unheard of now. The top artists now are not even putting out features like that at a clip because probably everything's about money. Lil Wayne probably didn't care about money. He just wanted to prove that he was the best rapper, and he did at that time. So that was the second one. The third one was Cushion Orange Juice from Wiz Khalifa. Now, this album was essential probably for the smokers, but me never being a smoker, the music took the music took you to somewhere organically to where you didn't have to be in that lifestyle. So the production on that album was top notch. Like the song Up that he produced, it was kind of like a love song, but it was like a slow jazz vibe type feel. That song, like I said, I go back and listen to that song randomly at times. And they did drop it on DSPs, I believe, earlier this year. But it was recently that they actually put that song on digital streaming platforms. And that's one of his greatest works, whether it be mixtapes or albums. His first album was classic as well, but that mixtape will go into history as one of the best mixtapes of all time. It has to be in most people's top 10, if not top 20, but definitely in the top 10 of all time. And then the song Never Been, um, like I said, it showed his range of being able to talk about different subject matter. He loved talking about cars, about his smoking habits as well. But he also talked about women and life stuff too. So he showed his range, and that served a purpose for what a mixtape could do. But that, in my opinion, could have been an album, and it would have been easily his best album. But he dropped it as a mixtape. So, and it showed how far he had came as an artist. He had been out as an artist a long time before he actually got the opportunity to go mainstream. So that was a classic album. And the next album mixtape that most people don't realize or may not even notice is the rapper of the game. When he left G Unit, he put out a mixtape called The Face of LA. Now, this was during a time that mixtapes could be sold. So it was a site I remember called Mix Unit. I used to order mixtapes off of there sometimes. So if I liked the mixtape enough, I would buy the mixtape offline. And it would just be these flimsy covers that somebody printed off a printer or something. And it would be like a CD, but it wasn't anything official. But I just wanted to always support the artist, even though they might have not, received any compensation back from it. But I used to always do that. Like I would download a CD, allegedly, and then I would go buy the album if I liked it enough. And sometimes if it was an artist I like the Carter 3 or like Plies CDs or something like that, I would go buy the album anyway, and I wouldn't ever, download it. I would just go straight to the record store and get it because I knew it was going to be a good album, and I didn't care what it sounded like. I wanted to support the artist. And the game was one of those artists that I wanted to support because I liked his rap style and I liked his content. He was a gangster West Coast rapper, but he had substance to it, similar to Ice Cube or Snoop Dogg and people like that. But this Face of LA album was personal to him because I think it was, it was post G Unit time when he had the beef with 50 Cent and G Unit, and he wanted to go his own way and prove himself as a rapper. And he was the best rapper in the group, I believe. Even 50 Cent, 50 Cent had bigger hits and had bigger number sales, but as far as pure hip hop and being able to rap and the cosigns that the game had from members of Wu-Tang and Ice Cube and all these different West Coast legends, even East Coast legends, and like Nas, he did a lot of songs with. He proved himself beyond. He didn't need a 50 Cent cosign. I really wish he would have started, his career solo or at least just with Dr. Dre and not with G Unit because it put a different stigma on him that he was kind of this poppy type artist, but he was pure hip hop, pure rap, and his Face of LA album showed that. He had a song called 100 Bars of I forgot the name of it, but it was 100 bars of him just pure rapping about stuff, and it showed his ability. And he showcased other artists as well. But this mixtape was very personal to him, and it evoked a lot of emotion. And he was just entering his prime of rap when he dropped that Face of LA mixtape. So that was a big one. The warm up mixtape, which just recently entered DSPs, with J. Cole. It was his introduction into the game. He had dropped mixtapes before, but he talked about his personal relationship with Jay-Z and how he kind of got shrugged off the first time he met Jay-Z, and how it made him hungrier as an artist, and how he was able to overcome that. And it also talked about how he didn't make the basketball team in high school and how heartbreaking that was. So he talked about other things other than just the braggadocious style that he can bring. He showed his range as far as being able to talk about his personal life and related to the music industry and what he's going through now. So you get to see his full journey as an artist, which is very, very major, and is very essential for artists to do that. It makes a connection to the listener and creates kind of this relationship between the listener and the artist. And that was major. And he broke through the fifth wall, so to speak, by being able to make that correlation between him and his fans and the listeners that wanted to become fans. And then lastly, the Wale mixtape. Um, and I didn't put the name of it, but it was More About Nothing. So that mixtape, like I said, I downloaded that one. I don't think I ever paid for that one, but back then, it was a site called That Piff, which just recently went away, I think earlier this year. Rest in peace to That Piff website. It was a important website that I used to go to, and everyone would go to and get mixtapes. A lot of those mixtapes, like I said, you couldn't buy them through the store or through, um, DSPs wasn't out back then. So the only way to get them was to download them through that Piff or go through these third party mixtape sites. So this mixtape, I remember exactly where I was listening to it. I was over my grandmother's house and I listened to it, and it was one of the first times I really heard Wale um, without the poppy sound, without the pop tunes that he used to put out. This was more of the real. This was Ambitious Girl, which he wrote his poetry, and he wrote like a poetry to a beat, or a poem to a beat, and he talked about what he looks for in a woman and how he rather her to tell him she didn't have the time to talk to him because she had to write a paper, other than him in his face asking for a drink. And he kind of like, he basically discussed what he looks for and what the sophistication he looks for in a mate, in a woman. So that mixtape was just amazing. Like I said, it had so much substance to it, and so many metaphors that related to college at the time when I was in college. So I related a lot to it because he talked a lot about college things. And also he had Jerry Seinfeld incorporated into the skits, into some of the songs, at the beginning of some of the songs, that which created even more relatability for him as an artist. Um, like I said, he was in the mold of the J. Cole's and the Kendricks and people of that like that. So that mixtape kind of broadcasted him or showcased him for me as a true hip hop artist, and not just somebody out just trying to make hits, but someone who's trying to have messaging in his music. So that was my mixtape spill. Um, Hopefully more mixtapes will come into streaming platforms soon. Like I said, those mixtape sites are kind of dying out and kind of decreasing in popularity, and they're just becoming more ad friendly, and it's more of a hassle to listen to. So like I said, I'll be looking out for mixtapes coming to DSP soon. So switching gears a little bit, Jamie Foxx is releasing his Netflix stand-up comedy special December 10th. And he's addressing a couple of things, and well, specifically, he's addressing um, basically his health scare that he went through recently, which was a mystery to most people. We just knew he was in the hospital. We didn't know what his diagnosis was. We didn't know anything about the situation. And a lot of people were in his um, situation trying to say, he's not going to make it, all these different things. So it was a lot going on there. And his family had to intervene, just saying he's okay, just give him his space, which artists rarely get their space anymore. And they put out these statements, but, most of these fans and stuff don't respect space and don't understand space. Like I said, they want to know what they want to know, even though it doesn't have anything to do with them. So it's nice that Jamie Foxx is going to put out his story, comedy style, and talk about these things and talk about what he went through and talk about his traumatic journey. He kind of released a video earlier this year, I believe, discussing how grateful he was for surviving his situation and felt like he was at his lowest ever. And he said he went through hell, literally. And he was talking about how life is short and how he values things and looks at things differently now. And, like I said, he's always been a top talent and always been a hard worker. But now I think he sees things from even a different lens, even more so than he did before. So, like I said, even he also has a movie releasing on Netflix with Cameron Diaz January 17th. So like I said, he's out here working and he's still doing the MGM gambling commercials for sports gambling. So yeah, he's still working and living his life and seems like he's going along well. But I love this move of him, telling his own story because like I tell a lot of people, no one can out you if you tell your own story. So when you tell your own story, you control your narrative. When you don't tell your story, there can be speculation, and there still will be some speculation about the truth about what happened in your life or what happened with you. But when you tell your story before it's sprung up, you control your narrative. When you leave silence, that leaves room for error. That leaves room for conversation. But when you tell your story, no one else can tell it because you told it and you control your narrative, and it completes the mission. A lot of people now are in the media are getting outed because they are living um, and not telling their stories. When you tell your story, you control your narrative. So a lot of times people ask me, why are you so honest about things? And I say, because, I don't tell them this, but it's because I can control my narrative. I can be able to tell my story. When you don't tell someone your story, then they find it out behind the scenes. They think you're trying to hide something or you're not proud of something. I tell my story because, like I said, I control my narrative and I'm not ashamed of anything. And I don't care if being scolded about anything. And this is what Jamie Foxx appears to be doing, is telling his story. So the narrative, he can control that narrative, and that's huge now. Um, and like I said, everyone counted him out, and everyone thought he was done. But like I said, God has the last word, and you control your own story. So don't let people control that for you. Like that's huge, especially in life, in the era of social media, in the era of TV being everything and content being everything. Everything is not for everybody, but at the same time, I'm telling my story. You don't have to tell it. Martin Lawrence did the same thing when he had like a lot of different things going on in Hollywood. What people thought he was going crazy. People thought he had some kind of health thing going on. Um, they said all these nasty and disgusting things about Martin, and he did his own comedy special called Run Tell That, where he kind of explained how Hollywood was trying to break him. Hollywood was trying to change him, but he remained the same person and overcame those obstacles, and that was such a huge platform for him to do so. Um, like I said, I haven't been a huge fan of Jamie Foxx's stand-up comedy. I watched I Might Need Security when he talked about different people in the industry, like a J Lo. He talked about LL Cool J. He talked about Mike Tyson. He talked about other people, and that's why the stand-up special was called "I Might Need Security" because he was talking about all these famous people who were probably going to approach him, but he wanted to, tell his jokes and tell real life stories of meeting these people. And he had a relationship with most of these people, whether it be through movies or TV shows. But he knew most of these people through being in the industry. So similar to that, um, there's rumors that in this special, Jamie Foxx will be talking about Diddy in some way. They didn't say how, but someone who viewed the stand-up special already said he made references to Diddy in it. I don't know if it was in a comedic style or it was in a condemning style. So uh, I'm not sure which one it was, but like I said, we'll find out on December 10th. So when you watch this, it'll be this upcoming Tuesday. So I'll be tuned in to check it out and see what he talks about and how he relays his message of his health scare as well. Um, but yeah, I just love this move from Jamie Foxx being able to tell a story and being able to put out more content and being able to provide for his family as well is more. So he could have sat down with anybody. He could have sat down with Gayle King, could have sat down with Joe Rogan, he could have sat down with Shannon Sharp. Maybe he's done these things already and it's just not released, but for him to actually put out the content in his way to answer his own questions and not have to be asked these questions and put out his variations of the story is major. Like I said, control your narrative. They can't control you. So switching to music, um, I'm going to review the Kendrick Lamar's GNX album. So I took some time to sit with this album because it got released around 2 weeks ago. So I want to really sit down with this album. And Kendrick has music that you have to sit with for a while to understand it. Even now, even the rest of the year, as I listen to it, there's going to be things I pick up on, things that I didn't catch before. From when I first listened to it, which I believe I was at work, so it was around noon or something. As I'm listening to the album, I didn't catch up on things. I was so excited that he dropped music because he drops music every 3-4 years. I was so excited that he put a collection of work together. And just like you, when you probably first heard the album, you listened to the YouTube 1-minute clip first. So you were like, oh, okay, he's going to drop an album soon. So at the end of the YouTube clip, I'm looking or expecting a release date coming up at the end of the year, end of the month, a couple weeks. Then I look in the comments and said the album, it was a track list. And I was like, wait a minute. So I look on Apple Music, there is the album. And I'm so excited I could barely listen to it because I'm so, like I said, I haven't had that feeling about an album in a while. And he reunited that or invoked that emotion in me. So just listening to the album on first listen, it sounds totally different than it did when I listened to it now. So getting into some of my favorite tracks on the album, like I said, I'm still listening to it and still trying to conceptualize the album. Like I said, this album was different than the rest of his albums. Then I'll get into that later. But Whacked Out Murals, he addressed different people on that song, and just to have the Mexican or the Hispanic singing at the beginning of most of these songs were very unique. I had never seen it done before. And the lady who actually did the singing on this album, she was on the news. I seen on the YouTube clip. She was on the news in, I believe, California, talking about the amazing opportunity she had to work on this album. It brought a different light to the album. It brought a different vibe. So it brought like a heartwarming experience seeing her sing these Mexican or Hispanic songs. So, but for the most part, Whacked Out Murals were just a song. He addressed a lot of different things about Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne, pretty much talking about how he was disrespected, not getting the Super Bowl, and how he felt about that. He talked about Snoop Dogg, co-signing the Drake diss song that Drake put out against him. He talked about Ice Cube, talking about he was Kendrick before Kendrick, and he kind of addressed Ice Cube. There's a line in the song that's just blank, and everybody wants to know what that line is. Hopefully, we'll get it one day, maybe not. But he made a reference at the end of the Whacked Out Murals song that I'm not sure if anyone's aware of when he talked about, have you ever ate Captain Crunch and proceeded to pour water in it? Now, a lot of people think he's making reference to previously before when he discussed talking about he used to eat Captain Crunch with water in it. But if anyone knows the movie Friday, the popular scene is when he ran out of milk and his dad said, you better pour some water on that stuff. I don't know if that was a reference to Ice Cube or not. That was something I caught. I haven't heard many people discussing that, but I'm not sure if he has a beef with Ice Cube or not, but maybe he was just addressing him that way. But that song was, like I said, that song was the intro. It gave you it. The rest of the album doesn't sound anything like it, which is not a bad thing. It's a Kendrick thing. Like I said, he's a true artist and he's painting a picture that he wants to paint, and he paints it different ways than everyone else. He's not the standard. So that song was pretty good. And then he had the song Luther, which had the Luther Vandross sample, and it features SZA, Say No More. Anytime SZA and Kendrick is together, it's been a hit. I haven't heard any song they put out together that wasn't a hit. So that song, I didn't even need to hear that song. I just knew who was on it. But I heard that song several times, and it's on radio now. So you hear it even more as the record plays. And then Reincarnated, which was the song where he sampled the Tupac song from back in the day. And he also made connections to different artists to his life. Like I said, pure Kendrick style. Very good song, very good flow. Like I said, this album was very West Coast laden. And this song makes you feel like Tupac was reincarnated. And that's what I think the message of, or the point of this song was trying to get to, is that he's just reincarnated from different artists and brought back to life now into one form. TV Off, like I said, that's the big song that everyone likes because of the mustard. When he screams mustard in the song and the beat change when the mustard comes out. That sounded crazy, but yeah, that whole song was just, it gave you two different vibes, and it gave you like a really laid back vibe, and then it turns into this club hit. So a lot of people are probably gonna be chopping up that second part of that second half of that song for radio play and for entertainment and for ventures and different things like that. So Hey Now, which was a very West Coast song. The production was pure West Coast, but it had Kendrick's rap on it with his same points to get across. Put a square in your back like Jack Dorsey was genius. Hard Part 6, which had the SWV sample. I love that song a lot. Like I said, he talked a lot about himself, but like I said, the beat didn't drown him out. Sometimes the production is so good that you don't really catch what the artist says, but you can still, there's a good mix of content and production on that. So they didn't overdo it. So, and then of course Dodger Blue, which is another West Coast laden production sounding song. Very good song. Like I said, I'm still listening to the album. It's gonna take a while to listen to this album to really get the gist of it. But from first listen, it's a great collective album, cohesive album, and sonically it sounds great. So I don't know how long it took him to do this album, but the Lil Wayne controversy just happened a couple months ago. So it seems like unless he made last minute edits and had been working on this album, it seemed like he worked on this album fairly recently. But like I said, there's no stories or rumors out there about when he actually worked on this album, but it seemed like it was fairly recent to the subject matter. Yeah, this album is just an ode to the West Coast, but like I said, it sounds a lot different than the rest of his albums. But when I think about it, this, I'm still listening to it and I still have to conceptualize it, but this is still not my favorite album from Kendrick. My favorite album is still The Pimp a Butterfly, but this sounds like it could go in the second spot. I'll find out in a couple of months or so when I still get my full listen on it. But for now, like I said, To Pimp a Butterfly is his best cohesive art. Subject matter, it wasn't too poppy. It was a lot of subject matter and a lot of songs that bring into question things that he feels strongly about in the Black community as well as in society. So that album is still my top. But lastly, a couple more things. He has a physical release of this album coming out in March. I will be buying that album because, like I said, I love CDs. But he just announced his tour with SZA, nationwide tour. And then he has a Super Bowl and Grammys coming up next year. So he's going to take all that momentum from the Drake beef from this summer, and he's going to drag that momentum all the way to next summer. So it's going to be a while before he kind of disappears. Usually he disappears a couple months after his album, but this time it seems like he's going to be here for at least a full year because that album and tour is going to drag into next summer. So that momentum is going to be huge for him going into next year. It's going to be interesting to see who puts out albums in that time. But like I said, his momentum right now is crazy, something we haven't seen in a long time. But listen to the album, I still feel like he has more left because the song on the YouTube clip was not even on the album. So I believe like a lot of people believe there's something else coming on the way as far as music from him. And lastly, I was watching the Joe Budden podcast when this album was released while they were recording. So we got a live, in-depth perspective from them live as they listened to the album, and they kind of skimmed through it on the first one, and they covered it more in depth on the next episode of the Joe Budden podcast. But seeing their reaction to that GNX release was, man, it reminded me of why I fell in love with hip hop, just because when you listen to things and it evoked emotion and made you feel a certain way, it it brought you hope. It's kind of like a kid on Christmas morning. I don't have that Christmas morning experience anymore, not being a kid anymore. But listening to the music now and hearing music drop and seeing these new releases is kind of my joy. So, and you don't get that all the time. So, I got Christmas a little early this year from this GNX release. So, to see the Joe Budden podcast members react to it and how excited they were for the album and how much joy it brought to them, it was exciting for me as well. So just to see that, it brought a smile to my face. So lastly, I'll talk about today is the decline of men's college basketball specifically. This is a unique one. So growing up, if anyone knew me, I grew up loving basketball at the age of 12. I got my first basketball goal for Christmas when I was 11 or 12 years old. I believe I was 12, and it was Christmas time, so it was cold. So I remember playing basketball and being a fan of it, and just watching it on TV and trying to emulate what they did on TV in my own front yard with people that grew up in the neighborhood. So basketball was always a part of my life. It wasn't my first love, but because football was, but basketball I think I loved more than football growing up, just because of the different, like, it was art. Like I said, being able to do a layup and shoot threes and these different angles and things like that. I just fell in love with the game of basketball. So the biggest thing about it was, men's college basketball was something I truly loved. I remember getting this magazine with a bunch of different posters of these men's college basketball players, and I put them on my wall. So I had about 20. So similar to in the background now, when I have all the album covers, I had different college basketball players on my wall. So men's basketball was huge for me back then. But back then, the rules were a lot different. There was a lot of things that didn't influence the game like they do now. There were different rules set. There was a different standard. But reading on different materials, I found an article from the New York Magazine last year, back in 2023, that talked about the men's game declining, the declination of the men's game, and the striving of the women's college basketball game. So there are several reasons for this. And they kind of talked about how women's college basketball is thriving due to the Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese fiasco and the different things surrounding that. It was like a lot of racial dynamics, and there was a lot of showboating going back and forth, and it ascended the game of women's basketball, and it's kind of now linking into the WNBA, which I'm a huge fan of the WNBA. It's kind of growing their game as well, as Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese has moved to the pro ranks in the WNBA. So it led me to think, why is the college game for men's basketball declining? It doesn't seem like the talent is decreasing. So what factors into this? So I came up with 3 reasons why. So to get into the first reason, this reason has been around for a while, so it's not really as relevant as the other 2 that I'll discuss. But the one and dones in the college basketball, I believe, caused some decline in the game, even though it's been around for a long time, but it's becoming more prevalent now. For one major reason, I think. Well, 2 major reasons. Well, one major reason now, because players are getting paid, so it's not like they're rushing to get money and are broke, like in the older eras. But the main reason for the one and dones is simply because the NBA has created this problem. The NBA has docked you if you stayed in the league more than 1 year. So players like Buddy Hield, who stayed, I believe, 3 or 4 years, he was drafted later because they said, if you're that guy or you're that talented, why would you stay in a college for 3 years? Not thinking about he was trying to get his education and things like that. Um, because I'm pretty sure he could have left before then and went in second round or got drafted or something. But they look at you in a different way in the NBA if you stay in the league more than, especially 2 years. If you stay out 4 years, they probably won't even look at you. You'll be undrafted and you have to go to someone's summer league. So that's a huge reason for why, players are not staying and why the viewership is going down. And I'll talk about the one and dones, what that does to the avid fan or does to the casual fan as well. Um, but times where a Tim Duncan, who's considered one of the best power forwards, if not the best power forward of all time in NBA, he stayed 4 years in college, and when he stayed in college, it wasn't seen as a knock because back then they wanted more mature players. Opposite of the NFL. The NFL, if you're a quarterback, they want you to have more maturation. So they want you, but you can't leave after 3 years anyway. So if you stay 4 years, it's not seen as much as a knock. They'll see you more as an experience. Now, if you're there 5 or 6 years, they have a different story. But in college basketball, the NBA looks at you differently. The more experience you have, the more or less miles you have, the less tread on the tires you have, they consider. And you're more marketable when you're younger and they can mold you and then, they can build on your skill set. But when you're older, they think you might have reached your ceiling. So that's one of the reasons why I think the decline in the men's college basketball game. But another reason in the men's college basketball game, the decline is just the alternatives. You can go to the G League, or you can go overseas and play, or you can just sit out a year and wait for the draft. But most people won't do that because you need some film that show that you recently still have that skill set. So mostly people go to the G League or go overseas. Recently, a lot of people have been drafted from France and these other countries because, like I said, these people are turning pro at 15 and 16, like a Luka Doncic, who's been pro since he's 16 years old. He's well seasoned. He's only been in the league probably 5 or 6 years, I believe. But in terms of being a pro, he's been a pro for over 10 years, just about. So things are seen differently overseas than they are in the college game. So all of these top-notch players going to the G League and going overseas is hurting the talent. I remember Brandon Jennings was one of the first people to do it coming out of high school. He went overseas. He didn't go to college and play basketball. He went overseas and then got drafted. So that kind of started this trend of players not going through our feeder system in college. College football, you have no choice other than coming out of high school, but to go to college football, then go to the pros. There's no other route that you can take, really. You have to go to college and put in 3 years, and then you can go to the league. The college basketball maybe should incorporate that, but the NBA is not going to set those rules because they want those players young as they can get them. They want them around 18 and 19 years old so they can mold them to where they want to and then be able to control their situations a lot better. And it's hurting the college game as a result, I believe. And then last is just fan fatigue, I think. Football is becoming more popular and NFL has, always been king, but they're taking over all of this broadcasting. They're taking over Thanksgiving. Um, they're taking over Christmas, which they usually never did. Um, they're taking over even Black Friday they're doing now. And then the league, the Super Bowl is mid-February now. It used to be late January. Now it's pushed all the way into 2 weeks. So people who watch football and basketball, like I used to watch football, and then when football was done, I watched basketball more often. But now you're pushing that all the way until late February now. And by then, everybody's gearing up for the playoffs. You pretty much wasted 90, majority of the season. So fans are just getting tired from having to watch all these different sports and all these different broadcasts. And then they have all these different apps that you have to watch the different games on. So a lot of people don't want to pay for all of that. So the fans are just getting tired with all the different stipulations and the different avenues you have to do to watch a game. So that's huge that's huge for the average fan. So, and then just to put a little bit back on college basketball to take it off of NBA, it's been a lack of storylines. So recently, the best storyline they had was 2019, I believe, when Duke had Zion Williamson, they had R.J. Barrett, and then they had Cam Reddish, three players that went in the first round that were top tier talents on one team. Then you had ancillary well, yeah, ancillary parts to that as well. But they're not enough storylines. UConn is pretty much a boring team, so they're not going to sell tickets or bring viewers. Um, Duke has Cooper Flag now, but he's kind of boring. He's not like highlight reel like a Steph Curry, LeBron James, or KD or somebody like that. There are no big names that they've been promoting, and I don't know if it's from a lack of promotion or just I don't think it's a lack of skill set. I just think it's a lack of storylines. Everything is about storylines. NFL and NBA, they have storylines, especially NFL. A lot of these players, fans follow teams and not just specific players. In college basketball, it's about following players unless you're from that city where that team is. But for the most part, there's no storylines. It's boring in college right now. I didn't watch college basketball until the tournaments a little bit, but I was mostly watching the women's game because it's more exciting. There's better storylines. There's better attraction. There's better fundamentals. Like I said, the men's game, they do too much now, crying about fouls and all this other stuff. Women's games, you just get pure basketball. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Scope Podcast. Like I said, until next time, I'll see you next time.